Good evening. It's Netta Feinstein with another edition of the Hasidic Nurses Notes. Today is May 11th, and it's the going into from the 24th to the 25th day of the month of ER. Begin with the morning meeting review why we're here. It's for Noachite, essentially, but for anyone who has Jewish brethren who have something they can pull out of this, and anybody else who is interested in pursuing a relationship with God, we call it Shem, the name, informally or formally. And so this is geared for that. And I'm going to start with the three items which I selected. Is first of all, there's no place without God. In Hebrew, we say Ein Od Milvado. There's no place outside of God. God has created everything. Coupled with that is Kol B'dei Shemayim. Everything is by the hand of heaven. So that would lead a person to say, if God's everywhere and everything, and He conducts everything, where am I at in that picture? And what responsibility do I have to take? And you have a big one actually, because with that saying that Ein Od Milvado, Kol B'dei Shemayim, except Chutz Yireh Shemayim, except for fear of God, which means following through and following God's commandments, whether you're a Jew with our 613 commandments um, listed in regular texts, and there's more, of course, implied, and then the seven commands of the children of Noah, the seven core commands, and with either one, I can make this statement, and I'm going to say specifically with the children of Noah, anything we discuss here, any wisdom from the world, from science or geopolitical, will come around, and you'll probably find that the source or the root or the foundation for its necessity, of whether it's a law, is comes from the seven laws of the commandments of the children of Noah. And therefore, anything I say, I'll have that in mind, and to reinforce that, I'm not just here as like a biblical analysis for mental stimulation, although that's part of things, but that's not the reason for the end reason for here. And to discuss politics and in a way that people discuss it like a ball game. That once you finish with a conversation, you turn off the television or the computer and you go about your business. Hopefully, anything we discuss here will lead us to do something further to make uh, this world a dwelling place for God. So we are here. God said, I'm going to partner with you, all of us, in each way, to give you a chance to perfect the world. I created the world, says God, but not with full perfection. I give this over to mankind to make it perfect and therefore a dwelling place where I can be revealed, and all the world will recognize God and have access to His will and wisdom. So going forward from there, that I title this as dealing with brick walls, or actually dealing with brick structures. So I will begin with the first one of the first brick structures mentioned in the Torah is what's called the Tower of Babel in the English translation, Babel, and it's called the time of the generation of the dispersion. This occurred after the flood of Noah, and a few hundred years later, people got together and they're thinking that there's going to be a cyclic destruction of the world. And they want to prevent it. So they began building a great tower. And one view of that tower is to support the heavens so there won't be a deluge coming down, although, as you know, the gates of the deep open up as well for the flood. But God said there won't be a flood to destroy the world, but people weren't confident with that. Another one is that they were beginning to turn to idol worship, and they wanted a structure, a place where they could go and worship in peace. And finally, is actually to rebel uh, against God and go up to the heavens and fight it out. So God took notice of this. On one hand, he was pleased because people got together for a common purpose. At that time, there was one language, which was Hebrew, Ivrit, and and they're working together in a common cause, and that's something God likes. To people work together and have peace between them. But the cause shouldn't be something that violates the seven laws of the children of Noah. And what did they do wrong? During the flood, it was explained that robbery and disrespect for people's integrity for property that was violated. But during this time of the generation of the dispersion, they worked together and they had respect for property. But their goal was more the spiritual nature of rebelling against God. So he didn't like what he saw, and he chose to stop it. And one of the things that he noticed is that the tower itself became the goal, a goal, and therefore objectives were altered to keep the tower as the goal and forget some of the dealings with mankind. Uh, One medrash or one explanation is that we were making bricks. They had to make bricks. There was no rocks and boulders in that area. So they became very skilled at making bricks and laying bricks. And they had to carry them up to the tower. They had ramps. And it was said that if a person accidentally dropped bricks, like this was a cardinal sin. And if a person tripped and fell and his loaded bricks went out, everybody was really concerned about the bricks, not the person. So things became distorted. Oftentimes, this happens that sometimes the objectives become the goal and the real goal becomes perverted, too much emphasis on it. And the objectives also become distorted to support that distorted goal. So here we had this happen. So God destroyed it. And in three ways. One was through fire. The second was that a third of it sank deep into the ground, if I read correctly, and the other third was left to stay just as a token. Um, Now, why doesn't God just wipe the whole thing out immediately? One of the reasons for that is described that when wicked people are, I'm not saying to what degree, but people in general, if not close to God and learn about God and learn his ways, if something goes wrong, they try to blame it on nature, a natural occurrence, rather than look to God and say, what do we do? What did we do to upset God? What does God want from mankind? And what is he not getting that he would cause something bad to happen? So if he breaks it down in three categories, that it's harder to blame it on nature. Again, nature is a creation of God as well, and he uses it is vital to make the world go around. And many things are dependent on time and seasons and epochs, time frames. So nature is essential, but it's not the ultimate. There's a saying that, how do you know what's a miracle? Well, we step back and say everything's a miracle because it's from God's creating it, something from nothing. And we're talking nothing as nothing that we perceive at all. And something comes from that, rather being formed something from something. So that makes almost everything a miracle. Something that's produced out of the bounds of nature. So what you're saying is a miracle or nature is described as a miracle that happened three times, I guess three times in a row or close consecutive order, like the sun going up and going down in predictable times for hundreds and thousands of years, the constellations in their position, and much more that we see in nature, how a tree grows and from a seed, that spark of life. How does the nutrients, sunshine, carbon dioxide, water get turned into leaves and fruit? I'd just like to stop right now and say that if I've ever used a description to describe something in this class, it's intended for we call derech mashal, a way of describing it, but it's probably not absolute. Or the only thing is absolute is God. And someone will find something and say, "Well, you said that about science, but I want you to know there's an exception to that rule, so therefore it's not valid." Um, well, dude, that logic is pretty good logic on the whole. Problem is, people don't use it all the time. They justify what they do with a certain amount of logic and take it the way they want when it comes to the point where the logic doesn't work. But Judaism recognizes that. We're just using as a way of an example, recognizing that it's not absolute. So it says in one of the in the books of explanation of the Torah. And by the way, some of the stories I tell you or explanations, you're not going to find it in the classic texts of the five books of Moses, and that's okay because we have what we call the oral Torah and the written Torah. So the written Torah is essentially the five books of Moses, the prophets, the judges, the writings, kings, and the oral Torah is the information you'll find in the Talmud and the Mishnah, Gemara. We have Midrashim, and people will say, "Well, you didn't get that information until like the turn of the millennium, like Common Era, which is that's when it was written down." Moshe was given as the written Torah and the oral Torah. So Torah was meant in part to be handed down from father to son, teacher to student, as a way of transmission. And I think we all recognize that if you just have a book to read, that's not going to be enough to do the job for a lot of situations. So God, was aware of that, and He created the oral Torah at the same time. He gave the written Torah to Moses in Mount Sinai in entirety. That's why Moses spent so much time up in Mount Sinai, 40 days, multiple 40-day jaunts, and came down with all this information. Um, Probably in itself is miraculous that he was able to retain it, and give it over. But that's part of our tradition. That's part of what we learn. So if you hear something I present and it's not in the classic written text that you're aware of, that's not a problem. So going forward, the Tower of Babel was destroyed in part, and the people were spread out in, with different languages in different countries, partially to prevent such an occurrence to happen again. So that's the first episode of BRICS. The second episode has to do with going out of Mitzrayim, not going out of Egypt, the Exodus, the slavery and Exodus of Egypt. One of the tasks the Jewish slaves had was to make bricks and build buildings, storehouses, and the like. And they, as this is well described, that when Pharaoh got upset from Moses coming to him, saying that God had told him to let the people go. So Pharaoh said, "These people have too much time in their hands, despite the brutal slavery." And he said, "If they can waste their time with this kind of thinking, I'm going to make it harder for them, keep them busier." So he said they took away the straw that they normally would give them in order to make the bricks from the mud and the water. So bricks played an integral part of the Jewish history in that Egyptian exile. One story from the Midrash is that the Egyptians were so cruel and their quotas were so strict that if quota wasn't being met, that they would throw people and children into the walls in lieu of the bricks. And not nice, to say the least. Cruel. And Moses complained to God. He said, "Okay, slavery is one thing, but this is little going beyond that. What's going on here?" So Hashem said to him, "Oh, so you're questioning my motives. So let's follow through with that." So one of the children were miraculously pulled out of the wall and recovered. And we learned that that child was present when they brought the bones of Joseph out from the bottom of the sea when they were leaving Egypt, because Joseph did not want to be buried in Egypt. And they put him in a casket or box at the bottom of the Nile River, and they had an incantation written, uh, and it said to say, "Arise, O ox," because Joseph had one of his nicknames as Ox. So, and it was written with God's name, the true name, and had miraculous powers. And his bones were brought up, and they were able to carry it. And there was the boy that was pulled out of the wall. His name was Micah, and he had retrieved that piece of paper. And when they came to the mountain, Mount Sinai, and they started to decided to make a golden calf, and they melted down all the golden jewelry, of the men, because they went to the women and said that women refused to give it. They wanted to go forward. They had tremendous faith in God, which still goes on. And therefore, the men gave their jewelry. They had enough and they melted it down. And what's the next step? Did they have molds, or they didn't have these instruments? So this Mika threw that paper into the molten gold, and there came forth the golden calf. A real downfall for the Jewish people, which we still um, experience the effects today. So that's another story with bricks. So I have a story with bricks. I have brick walls I was running into. I was in another locale outside of this country, and in that locale, um, there was a newspaper article claiming that the government was backing up a program to fight and to neutralize, perhaps, radicalization. And this was like maybe 10 years ago. And I looked at the article. part of it, and I was looking for who's the source of the information on how to do it. And I didn't see any kind of religious background in the founding fathers, or that it was stated. And I said, this is strange because radicalization is at times attributed to a religious group. So you're going to fight religion with no religion. So I figured this is really a perfect time to try to get the 7 laws of Noah introduced. So I contacted a member of the government in that area, and I sent a note that I read this article about fighting radicalization, and I may have something that could be very useful for them that I have an opportunity to present it. And the office manager, for not lack of another word, someone high up in the office said, I can't get you an appointment with the representative, but come in and talk to me, and if it sounds good, I'll forward the information. So I came in with my wife, who also teaches Jewish concepts to a certain select group, and with also a member of the Noahide group that I was working with, who was, I would say, an instrumental person in the community and in his history, and very sharp, very bright, and well read, who'd made the transition to Noahide. So we went in there and I explained Noahide, and I explained how it didn't require a conversion. It didn't require rejecting family. Uh, it was basically, belief in God and morals and ethics and values that anybody can achieve without, changing their lifestyle in any drastic way. And the person said, I agree with you. This is a very good introduction. And I see what you mean about needing a religion. And this seems to be the less, um, what'd you say, controversial presentation of, so we'll say the word religion, as I've seen, but we can't use it. You can't use it? No, because we are living in a country that is now considered secular. And there was a tremendous religious influence years ago, even in the government, and that's been highly rejected by the population, and it's now declared as a secular country. Polite, to the point, cordial, appreciative, and I didn't know what to do from there except thank them for the opportunity to present it. And not too long afterwards, I tried it at another office of a different representative, and basically got the same response, a positive reaction to what I was presenting, but a rejection of the whole thing because we're talking about God and religion, which is out of the government's format. Stone wall consisting of separation of church and state, as they use the term. And I thought about this. I said, there's something, something not right here. I developed a statement. If you hitch your head up against the wall long enough, you may start to see some cracks in the wall where you can wedge in something. And following that, I started to look up the term secularism because I'm thinking to myself, if we remove religion and religious presentation, where are our youth and elders, if you want, getting values, ethics, and morals, and a conscience? So going online, I did a search for secularism. I didn't use a dictionary or encyclopedia, and what I was getting was not a definition, but letters to the editor, you know, recent and going back a few years, of people vehemently opposing uh, religious doctrine dominating the government and the lives of people. I repeatedly saw that. Okay, I understand, but back to the same question: where is anybody getting morals, ethics, values? I'm sure the other nouns I could use related to that. And I said, we're talking about theocracy, not as a religion running or influencing the government. But what I'm presenting is theology, to the best of my knowledge, and that is giving people information. Uh, Historically, um, probably more consistent than anything in any presentation, any of the philosophies of many, many cultures, and organized in presentations. I'm not going to go into comparative religions, but I think all religions present some type of form. And the atheist argument is that religions cause so many problems, which I can't argue with. But nevertheless, atheistic cultures are probably worse historically, and we can point to something in the 20th century to demonstrate that. Millions of people died by the hands of a government that refused to have any religion within its borders and strongly refused and threatened the world. So back to how is a person going to make a decision in his life? Does he believe in God? Are there ethics somewhere? What's a conscience mean? Is something I have to pay attention to? And especially in the formative years, could that be from birth or a couple of years after or a couple of months up until 18 or when? But it's been described, and I'm not saying it's the ultimate science, but after adolescence and early adulthood, a person's value system um, is pretty well set, and the rest of behavior or modification is bent on revising that imprinted value system. So, where are people going to get an opportunity to decide what is wrong and what is right? And why should you follow it? Um, Take the opportunity that we had a parade for one of our holidays, Lag Bomer. So I used my car as a kind of a float. And I've also been on the street sometime. I'm doing what I can. And so this is one of the things, the posters I made, which I think characterize it part, no, okay, what's right and wrong? Where are you getting that information? Uh, Chances are God's the best source for that. Getting back to the Noahide, coming full circle. And another thing, what stimulates a need to do kindness and tell the truth? Where are people going to get this information to say that this is necessary for the society? I mean, a man's got to survive. You take care of yourself, As I heard say on the street one time, subway, you got to take care of number one. And again, hesitate to show this picture of myself, my identity, but I would stand out in the street myself. And I had cards, to hand out with no kite cards. And this kind of trying to characterize that you do what you can do. I didn't know. I got to a point where no, I was can't. I was advertising in a newspaper, Jewish newspaper, and I couldn't get a class together. And speak to a few different people. So I figure, all right, I'll go out and just hit the streets. So number seven, encourage courts of justice. So do what you can, however you can do it. So here we are at this point where if you get into a discussion about um, secularism, separation of church and state, that hold your ground because we're talking about presentation of theology, and that is knowledge. And I believe that comes under freedom of speech and freedom of information. And therefore, hold your ground and don't be intimidated by cliches. And this is again where I say where the Noachites are essential for the benefit of the world. Whether you're a school teacher, your neighbor, your administrator, whoever you are, if you can influence the development of a righteous generation based if you have no other resources, Noahide laws, and with the motivation that it's by the hand of God and the will of God. I just want to mention something with the Medrash. Just read this point. It was from back before with the tower, but it said, "When the wicked have troubles, they ascribe them to chance. For example, something happens to a person, um, they try to ascribe it to natural causes. The individual should be concerned with his soul. However, he must understand that whatever happened to the other person, he could have an involvement with it. I'd like you to get the picture that these books are taught to children and young adults, and you're not going to get this in public school. And we have to stop whatever's happening in the world, the corruption, the theft, and even now murder has turned into be a almost acceptable mode of protest. In some places seems acceptable, God forbid. So realize your value. I hope to speak to you again and give you more Torah information. And I live in South Florida, Hollywood area. I have a place available for Noachites to get together and learn, develop as a peer group, being with people who think like you, experience things you experience, and want to see this as a better place, a godly place for God to reveal himself and coming of Mashiach now. Thank you.